The void between stars held secrets that most species never wanted to find. Captain Delira of the Whisperwind knew this truth better than most. Her vessel glided through the cosmic darkness like a leaf on still water, its sensors reaching out into the emptiness with gentle curiosity. The Whisperwind was a beauty to behold, all flowing curves and luminescent panels that pulsed with soft amber light. It belonged to the Villani, a species whose entire civilization was built on the principle of harmony with the universe. Delira stood at the observation deck, her translucent skin catching the starlight and scattering it into rainbow patterns across the floor. She had 3 hearts that beat in synchronized rhythm, a biological feature that kept her people calm and measured in all their decisions. Her crew of 40 researchers moved through the ship with practiced grace, studying the ancient nebula they had discovered at the edge of charted space. They were collectors of knowledge, gatherers of cosmic wisdom, and they had been doing this work for 3 generations without encountering anything more threatening than a solar flare. That changed when junior scientist Torvek detected the signal. It came from deeper in the nebula, a structure that their instruments initially mistook for a natural formation. But natural formations did not emit perfect geometric patterns. Natural formations did not pulse with energy signatures that defied every law of physics the Villani understood. Delira ordered the Whisperwind closer, her curiosity overriding the small voice of caution that whispered in the back of her mind. The structure revealed itself slowly as they approached. It was a sphere of impossible size, easily dwarfing their research vessel by a factor of thousands. Its surface was black, not the black of empty space but a black that seemed to devour light itself. Strange symbols covered its exterior, shifting and rearranging themselves as if the structure was alive and thinking. Torvek ran every scan he could think of, his 4 hands dancing across his console with increasing urgency. The readings made no sense. The structure was old, perhaps older than the nebula itself, yet it showed signs of active power systems. It was clearly artificial, yet it matched no known architectural style in the galactic database. Most disturbing of all, it was waking up. The first sign was a low vibration that traveled through the Whisperwind's hull. Then lights began appearing on the structure's surface, spreading like infection across its vast expanse. Delira felt her 3 hearts skip their rhythm for the first time in her life. Something was very wrong. The hunter ships emerged from hidden bays in the sphere's surface. There were 6 of them, sleek vessels shaped like blades designed for cutting through armor and flesh. They moved with predatory precision, forming a perfect circle around the Whisperwind before Delira could even order evasive maneuvers. These ships were built by someone who understood violence in ways the peaceful Villani never could. Navigation Officer Brexis tried to turn the ship around, his hands trembling as he worked the controls. The Whisperwind was fast for a research vessel, capable of jumping to faster than light speeds with enough preparation time. But the hunter ships were faster. They closed the distance in seconds, their weapon systems lighting up with targeting indicators that painted the Villani ship in deadly red light. The first shot was not meant to destroy. It hit the engine compartment with surgical precision, crippling their ability to jump to safety without destroying the ship entirely. The Whisperwind lurched violently, throwing crew members against walls and scattering research equipment across the decks. Delira grabbed onto her command chair and felt something she had never experienced before in her 70 years of life. Pure, primal fear. The hunters did not press their attack. Instead, they pulled back and waited, circling the damaged research vessel like scavengers around dying prey. Delira realized with growing horror that this was not a battle. It was a game. The unknown attackers were playing with them, breaking them piece by piece, savoring their fear and desperation. Over the next standard day, the hunters destroyed their communication array, their defensive shields, and their secondary engines. Each attack came without warning, each strike landed with perfect accuracy. The Villani crew tried everything they could think of. They attempted to negotiate, broadcasting messages of peace in every known language. The hunters ignored them. They tried to hide in the nebula's dense gas clouds. The hunters found them within minutes. They even attempted to play dead, shutting down all systems and drifting silently. The hunters simply waited until life support started failing and the Volani had to power up again. Delira watched her crew growing weaker as the ship's environmental system struggled to maintain breathable atmosphere. Torvek had stopped working at his console and was curled in the corner, his skin turned a sickly gray color. Brexis kept trying to coax more speed from the damaged engines, but everyone knew it was hopeless. They were going to die out here in the dark, far from the warm waters of their homeworld, and no one would ever know what happened to them. The emergency beacon sat in its housing on the command deck, a simple device that every starfaring vessel carried. Delira had never imagined using it. The Volani had friends throughout the galaxy, peaceful species who would help if they could. But space was vast and help was far away. The nearest Volani fleet was 8 days distant. The Galactic Council's peacekeeping forces were even farther. But there was one group close enough to reach them. One species whose reputation made most civilized beings uncomfortable. The humans had a patrol route that passed within 6 hours of their current position. 6 hours. It might as well have been 6 years given how quickly the Whisperwind was falling apart. Delira knew the stories. Everyone did. Humans came from a planet where everything was trying to kill everything else. They evolved as pack hunters, developing complex strategies for bringing down prey larger and more dangerous than themselves. When they reached space, they brought that hunter's mindset with them, building warships that made other species nervous and training soldiers who seemed to actually enjoy combat. The Volani had always avoided human space. It was not that humans were hostile, exactly, but they were so aggressively helpful that it made peaceful species uncomfortable. They acted like self-appointed guardians of the galaxy, rushing into conflicts that did not concern them, making enemies of anyone who threatened species under their protection. They were loud, violent, and utterly unpredictable. But they were also close enough to help. Delira pressed the activation switch on the emergency beacon with one trembling hand. The device sent out a powerful signal in all directions, a mathematical sequence that translated the same way in every known language. We are dying. Unknown enemies hunt us. Please help. Anyone. Please. The signal raced through space at light speed, touching every ship and station in range. Most ignored it or sent polite messages explaining they were too far away. A few promised to forward the information to proper authorities. The message reached human listening posts, automated satellites, and finally, the bridge of the destroyer Ironclad, flagship of Captain Dane Riggs' patrol group. Riggs was in his quarters reviewing supply reports when the alert came through. He was a big man even by human standards, with broad shoulders and hands scarred from years of combat training. His face showed the weathering of someone who had spent most of his life in space, and his eyes held the sharp focus of a predator analyzing potential threats. The communication officer, Lieutenant Park, appeared on his screen looking worried. "Captain, we have a distress call from a Volani research ship. Unknown hostiles. They are 6 hours away at maximum burn." Riggs pulled up the tactical display and studied the situation. 6 hours was a long time in space combat. The Volani might already be dead by the time his ships arrived. But then again, they might not be. He thought about the Volani he had met during diplomatic functions. Gentle creatures who spent their lives studying beautiful things and sharing knowledge freely. The idea of someone hunting them for sport made something angry and protective rise in his chest. "All ships," he ordered, his voice carrying the absolute authority that made his crew move fast. "Battle stations. Set course for the Volani distress signal. Maximum speed. Weapons hot. We have hunting to do." The human fleet turned like a school of sharks sensing blood in the water. 3 destroyers and a support carrier, all bristling with weapons that could crack planets. They burned through space toward the unknown enemy, and every human aboard felt the same ancient instinct rising. Someone was hurting the weak. Someone needed to be stopped. And humanity had never been good at backing down from a fight. The Whisperwind drifted through space like a wounded bird, trailing coolant vapor and flickering emergency lights. Delira pressed her forehead against the cold observation window and watched the hunter ship circle closer. They had been silent for 3 hours now, just waiting, and somehow that was worse than the attacks. Her crew huddled together in the central chamber, sharing body heat as the life support systems failed section by section. The ship that had been their home and workplace now felt like a tomb. Torvek had managed to rig a temporary patch to the communication system before it died completely. He intercepted fragments of automated responses to their distress call, distant voices offering sympathy but no actual help. The Galactic Council acknowledged their situation. The Thasian Empire expressed concern. The Moravian Collective promised to investigate. Empty words from species too far away to matter. Delira felt something bitter rising in her chest, an emotion the Villani had no proper word for because they so rarely experienced it. Abandonment. Then Torvek picked up something different. A tight beam transmission, military encryption, human origin. It was brief and direct in the way only humans communicated. Hold position. Cavalry incoming. 5 hours 20 minutes. Stay alive. Delira read the message 3 times before its meaning fully registered. The humans were coming. Not just acknowledging the distress call or promising future assistance, but actually coming right now. She felt her 3 hearts stutter with an emotion caught somewhere between hope and terror. The humans were the most violent species in known space, and she had just invited them to a battlefield. Brexus looked up from where he sat slumped against the navigation console. His voice was weak but carried a thread of desperate optimism. 5 hours. Can we last 5 hours? Delira studied the damage report scrolling across her command display. Hull integrity at 60%. Life support operating at minimal capacity. Emergency power cells down to 20% charge. The hunter ship still circled outside, occasionally firing a shot to keep the Whisperwind crippled and afraid. They were clearly in no hurry to finish their prey. We have to, she said simply. Start shutting down everything non-essential. Crew quarters, research labs, recreational spaces. Route all power to life support and whatever shields we have left. Her crew moved to obey despite their exhaustion. The Villani were not warriors, but they were survivors. Their species had endured ice ages and solar storms and the slow death of their original sun. They understood patience and endurance even if they did not understand violence. The hunter ship seemed to sense something had changed. Perhaps they detected the power redistribution, or maybe they simply grew bored with their game. Either way, they moved into attack formation again, their weapons charging with that familiar deadly glow. Delira braced for impact, knowing this might be the strike that finally broke them. The lead hunter ship fired. Its weapon cut through space like a blade of pure light, aimed directly at the Whisperwind's command deck. But the shot never landed. Something massive dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly between the Villani ship and the attack, absorbing the blast on armored hull plating that barely registered the impact. The ironclad had arrived early, pushing its engines beyond recommended limits to cut travel time. The human destroyer was half the size of the ancient sphere but moved with aggressive purpose that made it seem much larger. Its hull was dark gray, covered in weapon ports and sensor arrays that gave it the appearance of some deep ocean predator. Running lights spelled out its name in human script, a word that translated roughly to "cannot be broken." Delira watched in stunned silence as 2 more human destroyers emerged from jump space, taking positions that formed a protective triangle around the Whisperwind. The carrier followed moments later, already launching small fighter craft that swarmed out like angry insects. The entire human fleet had made the journey in just over 4 hours, cutting their estimated arrival time by pushing their ships to dangerous limits. On the Whisperwind's damaged communication system, a human voice crackled through. Villani vessel, this is Captain Riggs of the human destroyer Ironclad. We have your position. Maintain current status and prepare to be escorted to safety. The hunter ship seemed as surprised as Delira felt. They had been the predators for so long, circling and tormenting easy prey. Now something had entered their hunting ground that did not run, did not beg, and did not show any sign of fear. The 6 hunter ships broke their formation and moved to engage the human fleet. What happened next would be discussed in military academies for years to come. The hunter ships were advanced, their technology possibly centuries ahead of current galactic standard. They were fast, maneuverable, and their weapons could slice through standard military shielding like it was not there. Against most species, they would have been unstoppable. But humans did not fight like most species. The hunter ships expected a defensive formation, ships clustering together for mutual protection while attempting to negotiate or retreat. Instead, the human destroyers split apart and attacked from 3 different vectors simultaneously. They moved with coordinated precision that spoke of countless hours training together, each ship covering angles that left the hunters exposed no matter which direction they turned. The ironclad took point, its forward batteries opening fire with weapons that lit up the nebula like a newborn star. Unlike the hunters' precision energy beams, human weapons were varied and unpredictable. Mass drivers that hurled solid projectiles at relativistic speeds. Plasma torpedoes that could adjust course mid-flight. Electronic warfare systems that scrambled targeting computers and filled space with false sensor readings. One hunter ship made the mistake of pursuing the ironclad too aggressively. It found itself boxed in by the 2 other destroyers, caught in crossfire from multiple angles. The hunter tried to use its superior speed to escape, but human tactical computers predicted its movement and filled its escape route with weapons fire. The hunter ship's shields collapsed under sustained bombardment, and moments later it was tumbling through space trailing atmosphere and debris. The remaining 5 hunters regrouped, recognizing they faced opponents who actually knew how to fight. They formed a tight defensive sphere and began coordinating their attacks, trying to overwhelm one human ship with combined fire. It was a sound tactical decision that would have worked against most enemies. Riggs watched from his command deck and smiled without humor. The hunters were thinking like predators, trying to separate and destroy the herd one member at a time. But humans were pack hunters. They did not abandon their own. The targeted destroyer, the Relentless, did not try to escape. Instead it angled its heavy armor toward the incoming fire and powered its shields to maximum. It took the punishment, hull plating glowing red-hot, while its sister ships maneuvered into flanking positions. The carrier launched a full wing of fighters that came at the hunters from above and below, too small and numerous to target effectively. The hunters were skilled, but they had never faced an enemy like this. An enemy that absorbed damage while setting up killing blows. An enemy that worked together with the seamless coordination of a single organism. An enemy that seemed to get more aggressive when hurt rather than backing down. Delira watched the battle unfold on her damaged sensors and felt something shift in her understanding of the universe. The Villani had always believed that peace was the highest virtue, that violence was a failure of civilization. But watching the humans fight was like watching a masterwork of deadly art. Every movement had purpose. Every shot was calculated. They were not fighting with rage or hatred, but with professional competence that was somehow more frightening. Another hunter ship made a mistake, breaking formation to chase a damaged human fighter. It was a trap. The fighter led it straight into a debris field where 3 more fighters were waiting in ambush. They swarmed the hunter from all sides, their smaller weapons targeting sensor arrays and weapon ports with surgical precision. The hunter tried to swat them away, but humans' pilots flew with a recklessness that made Delira's hearts race. They dodged and weaved through fire that should have killed them, trusting their reflexes and their machines in ways that seemed impossible. The hunter ship's weapons went dark as the fighters systematically disabled them. Then the ironclad arrived, and a single torpedo finished what the fighters had started. Another enemy destroyed. 4 hunters remained, and they were no longer playing. They abandoned their game and fought like cornered animals, desperate and dangerous. Their attacks became more aggressive, their movements less predictable. One managed to land a solid hit on the carrier, punching through its shields and tearing a gash in its flight deck. Atmosphere vented into space along with 2 human fighters that had been preparing to launch. Riggs felt anger flare hot in his chest. His people were dying. The enemy had drawn blood. Time to end this. He opened a channel to his fleet and issued orders in the clipped military language that humans used in combat. All ships, weapons free. Burn them down. The human fleet stopped holding back. They had been fighting carefully, trying to disable rather than destroy, hoping to capture hunter ships for study. Now they fought to kill. The destroyers formed a wall of fire that nothing could pass through. The fighters abandoned their harassment tactics and went for critical systems. The carrier, damaged but still operational, began launching heavy bombers that carried weapons designed to crack fortified positions. The hunters realized too late that they had pushed the humans past some invisible line. The predators became prey. One hunter ship tried to flee, jumping to faster than light speeds. A human destroyer followed, its jump drive already spooled up and ready. In human tactics, you did not let wounded enemies escape to fight again later. You finished what they started. 2 hunters remained in the immediate battle space, fighting with the desperation of cornered animals. They were skilled and dangerous, but they were alone and surrounded. The humans worked together like parts of a single machine, each ship supporting the others, covering weaknesses and exploiting opportunities. When one hunter tried to target the wounded Whisperwind, thinking the humans might back down to protect their charge, 3 human ships moved to block the shot simultaneously. The message was clear. You wanted to hunt the weak. Now you face the strong. The final 2 hunter ships fought like creatures that knew death was approaching but refused to accept it quietly. They spun and dove through the debris field left by their destroyed companions, firing desperately at anything that moved. Their weapons still carried deadly accuracy, and they managed to score hits on the Relentless, opening new scars across its already damaged hull. But accuracy meant nothing when faced with an enemy that simply would not stop coming. Delira watched from the Whisperwind as Captain Riggs maneuvered the ironclad with a grace that seemed impossible for something so large and heavily armed. The destroyer moved like it was dancing, each turn and acceleration timed perfectly to avoid incoming fire while positioning for the killing strike. She realized she was witnessing something the peaceful species of the galaxy rarely saw. Humans at war. Not fighting for territory or resources, but fighting because someone weaker needed protection. One of the remaining hunters made a final desperate play. It accelerated directly toward the Whisperwind, weapons charging for what would certainly be a killing blow. The message was clear even without words. If the hunters were going to die, they would complete their hunt first. Delira felt her 3 hearts freeze as she watched death approach in the form of glowing weapon arrays. But between one heartbeat and the next, the ironclad was there. Riggs had pushed his ship to maximum thrust, placing his destroyer directly in the path of the attack. The hunter's weapons struck the ironclad's forward shields with enough force to light up the entire nebula. For a terrible moment, Delira thought the human ship would be torn apart. The shields blazed white hot, then blue, then began to fail in cascading waves of energy discharge. Inside the ironclad, alarms screamed as shield generators overloaded. Riggs gripped his command chair and felt his ship shake like it was being torn apart by invisible hands. His crew worked frantically at their stations, rerouting power and managing damage. Lieutenant Park's voice cut through the chaos with urgent precision. Forward shields at 15%. Hull breaches on decks 3 and 5. Shield generators 2 and 4 are offline. Riggs did not hesitate. All remaining power to forward weapons. Fire everything. The ironclad unleashed its full arsenal at point-blank range. Mass drivers, plasma torpedoes, laser batteries, and experimental rail guns that Riggs had been saving for a desperate moment. Every weapon fired simultaneously, creating a wall of destruction that nothing could survive. The hunter ship tried to evade, but it was too close and moving too fast. The human weapons tore through its hull like paper, finding reactor cores and ammunition stores. The hunter ship exploded in a brilliant flash that briefly outshone the nearby stars. The final hunter realized it was alone. Its companions were destroyed, the ancient sphere offered no support, and it faced a human fleet that had just demonstrated they would sacrifice their own ships to protect others. The hunter did what any sensible predator would do when faced with a stronger opponent. It ran. The sleek vessel turned and burned its engines at maximum power, trying to reach jump distance. Human fighters pursued, firing constantly, but the hunter's shields held. It was going to escape. Riggs watched the fleeing ship on his tactical display and felt a cold calculation settle over him. That hunter had spent days tormenting peaceful researchers. It had played with them like a cat with a mouse, drawing out their fear and suffering. If it escaped, it might do the same to others. The carrier was too damaged to pursue. The Relentless had maneuvering thruster failures. That left only the Ironclad and its sister ship, the Defiant. Both were battered and running on emergency power. By all logical military doctrine, they should let the enemy go and focus on rescue operations. Riggs had never been very good at following doctrine. Defiant, form up on me. We are going hunting. The two destroyers jumped to faster than light speed in pursuit of the fleeing hunter. They pushed their damaged jump drives beyond safe limits, crossing distances that should have taken hours in mere minutes. The hunter was fast, but human ships were built for long pursuits. They had endurance that came from evolving on a world where persistence hunting meant chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. The chase lasted 6 hours across 3 star systems. The hunter tried every evasion technique it knew, doubling back, hiding in asteroid fields, even attempting to lose its pursuers in the gravity well of a gas giant. But human sensors were designed by a species that had hunted in every environment their deadly world offered. They tracked heat signatures, radiation trails, and the subtle distortions that faster-than-light travel left in space. Finally, the hunter's engines began to fail. Years of advanced technology could not overcome simple physics. The ship had been damaged in the earlier battle, and pushing damaged systems to their limits had consequences. The hunter dropped out of faster-than-light travel in an empty system, its engines dark and cooling. The two human destroyers emerged from jump space on either side of the disabled vessel. For a long moment, nobody moved. The hunter sat silent and dead in space. The human ships kept their weapons trained but did not fire. Riggs opened a communication channel, broadcasting on all frequencies. Unknown vessel, this is Captain Dane Riggs of the human fleet. Your ship is disabled and you are surrounded. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. You will be treated according to the laws of war and given fair trial for your actions. You have 60 seconds to comply. There was no response. The hunter ship remained dark and silent. Riggs counted down the seconds, giving the enemy every chance to surrender. When the timer reached 0 and there was still no response, he gave the order he had hoped to avoid. Fire. The Ironclad and Defiant opened fire with precision shots aimed at the hunter's remaining systems. They were not trying to destroy, but to disable completely. The hunter's hull cracked open in several places, venting atmosphere and revealing the dark interior. Still there was no sign of life, no distress signals, no attempt at communication. Riggs authorized a boarding party. Human Marines in heavy armor crossed the void between ships, entering the hunter vessel through the breaches. What they found inside confused and disturbed them. The ship was automated. There was no crew, no living beings, just sophisticated artificial intelligence running on ancient computer systems. The hunters had been machines all along, programs designed for a single purpose: to hunt and kill. The Marines found records in the ship's databanks, fragments of information that painted a disturbing picture. The ancient sphere was a weapon platform, built by a species long extinct. It was designed to activate when approached, sending out hunter ships to destroy any vessel that came too close. The Villani had stumbled upon a defense system older than most current civilizations, an automated guardian that no longer had anything to guard. Back in the nebula, medical teams from the human carrier had boarded the Whisperwind. They moved through the damaged research vessel with efficient care, treating injured Villani and stabilizing critical systems. The humans were surprisingly gentle for beings with such violent reputations. They spoke softly, moved carefully around the fragile researchers, and worked with genuine concern for their patients. Delira watched a human medic named Stevens treat Torvek's radiation burns with steady hands and quiet competence. Stevens was young, probably barely past human adolescence, but he worked with the confidence of someone much older. He noticed Delira watching and offered a small smile. "Your friend is going to be fine. These burns look worse than they are. We will have him fixed up in no time." Delira felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. "Why did you come? You do not know us. We are nothing to your people." Stevens looked genuinely confused by the question, as if she had asked why water was wet or why stars shone. "You needed help. That is all that matters. Where I come from, we have a saying. Nobody fights alone. It means when someone is in trouble, you help them. Does not matter if they are friends or strangers. You help because it is the right thing to do." Delira thought about that simple philosophy. The Villani had always believed in peace and harmony, in avoiding conflict and studying the universe's beauty. They had thought that made them civilized, that violence was something barbaric species engaged in. But watching these humans, seeing how they risked everything to protect strangers, she realized civilization was not about avoiding conflict. It was about what you did when conflict found you anyway. Captain Riggs returned to the nebula 12 hours later, his ships battered but intact. He met with Delira aboard the Ironclad, in a conference room that smelled of recycled air and human coffee. He was even larger in person, with scars on his hands and a presence that filled the room. But his eyes were kind when he looked at her. "Your people are safe. We have engineers working on the Whisperwind. She will fly again." Delira felt her 3 hearts swell with gratitude that had no words in any language. "Thank you. We thought we would die out here. Nobody else was coming." Riggs shrugged, a very human gesture. "We were close enough to help. That is what matters." He paused, then continued with something that might have been respect in his voice. "Your distress call reached a lot of species. Most of them had reasons why they could not respond. Too far away, not their problem, resources needed elsewhere. Humans hear a lot of those same excuses. But we decided long ago that when someone calls for help, you answer. Even if it is hard. Especially if it is hard." Delira understood then why other species feared humans. Not because they were violent, though they certainly were. But because they had principles they refused to compromise, even when it would be easier to look away. They had decided that protecting the weak was worth dying for, and they meant it with every fiber of their being. Over the following days, as human engineers repaired the Whisperwind and human doctors tended to injured Villani, Delira watched her crew interact with their rescuers. The two species could not have been more different. Villani were gentle and contemplative. Humans were loud and energetic. But they found common ground in shared meals, in stories exchanged, in laughter that transcended language barriers. Torvek spent hours with Stevens, learning about human medicine and sharing Villani research techniques. Brexis challenged human pilots to navigation competitions and was delighted to discover they cheated just as creatively as he did. Even Delira found herself enjoying conversations with Riggs about philosophy and the nature of civilization. When the Whisperwind was finally ready to depart, fully repaired and provisioned, Delira stood on her observation deck one last time before leaving. The human fleet was forming up to escort them to safe territory, though their own ship still showed signs of battle damage. Riggs had explained that protecting the Villani home was more important than returning to base for repairs. Delira activated her communication system and sent a message to the Ironclad. Captain Riggs, my people do not have much to offer in return for what you have done. We are researchers, not warriors. But if you ever need knowledge, if you ever seek understanding of the universe, the Villani will share everything we know. You have our friendship for as long as stars burn. Riggs' response came with warmth that carried even through electronic translation. Captain Delira, you have already given us something valuable. You reminded us why we do this. Why we built these ships and trained these crews. Not for conquest or glory, but to make sure that when someone calls for help in the darkness, there is always an answer. Safe travels, friend. And remember, nobody fights alone. As the Whisperwind jumped to faster than light speeds with its human escort, Delira looked at her crew and saw something new in their eyes. Hope. Understanding. The knowledge that the universe held both terrible dangers and unexpected heroes. They had called into the void expecting nothing, and found that some species still believed in helping strangers simply because it was right. The Villani would return home changed, carrying stories of the day the most dangerous species in the galaxy proved they were also the most compassionate. Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.